Welcome back to another episode of Demystifying Self-Publishing. I'm your host, Alyssa, and today I am joined by Monika Blichar, a self-published children's author and artist. Monika turned her books into a full creative business, including merchandise, art, and storytelling that connects with young readers. We'll talk about writing, self-publishing, and marketing, and how to turn your stories into something bigger. Thank you so much for being here today, Monika.
Yay, I'm excited to be here.
I would love to first chat about your journey overall. You can tell us a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to start writing children's books.
Perfect. Yeah. So I've been a creative person my entire life. When I was really young, I used to write storybooks and I would draw and paint and all kinds of different things. And eventually that led me to taking courses in college. I pursued languages and then teaching. And then about 10 years into running my own business. My first book was with a partner, actually. I illustrated and she wrote it. It was called Murray the Dragon. And then I thought, I want to do my own book. So I made my own.
Amazing. Well, we're going to chat a little bit more about your specific journey to writing your book and, of course, the plushie that accompanies it, because I think that that is such a unique offering that not many authors end up pursuing, but I think a lot are interested in. They maybe just don't know how to go about it. So
Yes.
I think that that's going to be really valuable for our audience. Was there a specific moment where you decided to pursue the self-publishing route instead of going that more traditional route?
Well, we'd already published Murray the Dragon with Tellwell, the first one. And I enjoyed my experience so much. I really liked having full control of the project, full control of the financials, full control of like the marketing and what we were doing and not relying on other people. I'm very motivated and self-driven. So I would not recommend self-publishing to people who can't be motivated and follow their own deadlines and meet their own goals. But I really liked that whole process. So when I decided to do this book, I thought I'm just going to do it again that way because there's lots that I want to do with the book. And I don't ever want to give any of the rights or the control away in the future. For example, video content and doing like a short film out of it or a series of short films. I don't want to ever have to like ask for permission. So for me, self-publishing was a way to retain the control over the project and also the future things that I can do with it.
I think that there is a lot of misconception around self-publishing and the difference between that and traditional publishing and the validity of work for authors who choose to self-publish versus pursue traditional publishing. But a lot of authors end up going the self-publishing route for that exact reason. They don't want to sacrifice any of the rights to their own work. They want to be able to market the things that they want to market or do it in a creative way without kind of having that gatekeeping around their own work. And so it's great to hear that that was a big inspiration for why you decided to pursue self-publishing.
Yeah, I think too, like to add, like I've been selling my own art and other people's art as well for years and years. And I've always liked having that control over my own images and my own ideas, right? And for me, being an entrepreneur that's why I went into entrepreneurship is because I didn't like people telling me what to do or how to do it or how to, present things or whatever, which is fine. I mean, teamwork is great and working corporate or working in different situations is awesome. But for me, it's really important to me to just follow my own ideas and develop my own ideas without that leash and that like, you can't do this and you can't do that. So the self-publishing was an easy decision for me, for sure.
Amazing. I think also something that we often see are people who maybe think that self-publishing is relinquishing like the entire project and releasing it to a company to kind of run through and give you a final product, and then you can kind of wipe your hands of it, and that's where the process ends. But as you mentioned, there are a lot of steps, deadlines, feedback required, supervision kind of on your end to stay on top of, which is what makes it such a unique and collaborative process.
Totally. And I think like you really have to be willing to ensure that you're able to meet your own deadlines and meet your own goals, right? Like the self-publishing and even just, I mean, being an entrepreneur, I think some people forget. They're like, I'm just going to publish a book, or I'm just going to make a piece of art, or I'm just going to put something out on the market. And they forget that they have to like do a book tour, and they have to do social media, and they have to do events, and they have to do a launch, and they have to do a sale and a promo. And then all year you have to keep marketing this thing, right? So I think that is one of the things I think a lot of artists and a lot of writers forget about too, right? Like it's not just the publisher, that whatever publisher you're with, they're not just going to do all the work for you, right? There's a lot of work that you
Absolutely.
have to put in to all of your creative projects for them to succeed, right? And things are not an overnight success, right? Like you can sell 100 books in the first week and then sell nothing for another year, right? So it just depends really on how committed you are to the project, right? And how dedicated you are to the constant marketing and the business side of it all. Right?
Definitely. I think that there are people who are really comfortable with just, producing the project for their family, for their friends, and then sitting back and now it's a beautiful legacy or memento that they have to hold on
Yeah.
to. But for those that are looking to pursue authorpreneurship and really
Yes.
turn their written work into a business or into a sustainable income stream,
Yes.
that marketing and that hustle is really important.
Absolutely.
Where did your know-how of that process come from? I know you've been an entrepreneur and a creative entrepreneur specifically for many years. So how has that landscape changed and what does that learning process look like over time?
Well, a lot of it is trial by error. When I started, I went from a traditional job teaching high school into full on events and marketing and trying to sell my artwork and then trying to sell classes and trying to sell education, and then developing and growing that. But that was all a lot of trial and error. I listened to hundreds of ebooks and podcasts, and I learned from other people. I follow tons of entrepreneurs in the creative space. So I didn't go to business school. I took a lot of business courses, read a lot of business books, and just watched and observed what other people were doing. And that's kind of how I learned things. And now, of course, I have more like connections and contacts that I can talk to face to face, but I still enjoy like reading a ton of books about self-improvement and business development. And I really just like watch what other people are doing and then try to apply that. And of course, like everything that you try isn't going to work. One thing might work in your area and then it's not going to work. The same thing next year isn't going to work, right? So it's an ongoing evolution all the time of this trial and error of what you're doing and seeing how the market responds. In addition to that, I think too, like paying attention to what people want is a huge thing, right? I think a lot of artists and a lot of writers, a lot of creative people, filmmakers, all sorts of people who create for themselves. And yes, that's important, but if you're creating always for yourself without looking at what and analyzing what the market is actually needing, then there is this real hard process and this hard journey in order to like actually make a living out of it, right? And a lot of people I think to want to make the transition from like working as a full-time teacher, for example, to working as a writer or an author or an artist or whatever, and they forget that part, right? That it like takes a lot of time to build something. You can't build a company overnight, right? It's going to take years to do that, right? So the commitment level really is a high level of dedication and doing whatever it takes to make it all work, right?
Definitely. I think, one of the things that you mentioned that stood out to me and that I've heard kind of echoed from our own book marketing consultants is immersing yourself in the environment that you wish to be a part of. So that community of entrepreneurs and
Yes.
people who are out there living the life that you want to live and to be a part
Yeah.
of. And so reading their ebooks and joining in on their communities and those discussions on social media, I think is a really great place for anybody to start if they are looking
Totally.
to kind of get their feet wet and see what that journey looks like.
You kind of touched on it too. It's all about like liking something first. And authors and artists do this all the time. We think of something and then we create it into reality. But if you're not thinking of yourself as the author, as the expert, as the person who has this rich, beautiful life, like you have to imagine that also first. And then build it, right? So it's kind of like going into that whole energy and that manifestation and surrounding yourself with this community, but also believing in yourself enough that you can make it happen, right? And if you don't believe in yourself, it's never going to happen for you either, right? Like no matter how good you are of an author, an artist, if you don't believe in yourself, you don't imagine yourself, you don't picture yourself as the success, it will never happen for you because you're repelling it too, right? So there's an element of that as well, of that energy and that belief and that determination, because you can be surrounded by the best people all the time, and if you don't have that attitude and that belief, it's just not going to work out, you know?
Definitely. It's actually interesting that you mentioned that because we just recently had an episode where we chatted with Monika Martinez, who's our head of marketing, and she was very much chatting about the power of manifestation and having an abundance mindset and visualizing your life and thinking about those things that you want, and how the intention and that thought fueled by the emotion associated with it and then the action are
Yes.
kind of the three steps that lead you to be able to successfully implement these things in your life and achieve these things in your life. So it's really interesting that there are so many people within the creative field who are aligned in that thought
Yes.
process and
Yeah.
what that vision looks like.
It's super fascinating. I started reading about all of that stuff very early. It became very popular with I think Oprah's book club. They did The Secret like in
Yes.
2008 or something. And I was like, what's this? But I always had that. Like my friends and my family always say, Monica, everything you touch always turns to gold. And that's because
Mm.
I always, when I look back at it, it's like I always just like would be very mindful of what I'm creating. Like I want to create my painting. My life is my painting. My life is my masterpiece. So like I want to create things in that life that are positive, that are fun, that are opportunistic, that are like, yeah, helping other people and that are inspiring other people, right? So I always approach it that way. And I think that if you stay in that energy and in that vibration, that's kind of a buzzy word right now, but it's kind of like one of those secrets, right? And I think people, yeah, people definitely forget about that too, you know? Energy is
Definitely.
important.
Yeah, there's so much that goes into the process,
Yeah,
right? In
totally.
behind the scenes, it's not just what you're putting out there, it's also that inner work that you're doing that
Hmm.
helps all of that kind of fall into place and to
Hmm.
align. So I would love to chat a little bit about your process. So we've talked a little bit here about the visualization of what you wanted your life to look
Yes.
like. But what is the process for you for creating a children's book? So you had illustrated a book previously that was
Hmm.
published and then decided to write a book yourself, which you also illustrated. I
Hmm.
would love to learn about where the initial idea came from for this specific
Sure.
book and the process to getting to the end of that manuscript.
Okay, so the cover of this, I'm gonna open this. The cover of this book, I painted just random. I went through like a series of surrealistic type painting. For about 8 years, I painted these very, I'll show you. The first picture is what I
Yes,
started
please.
with.
This is going to be on YouTube in addition to being audio for our friends who want to watch. So, this, wow,
This is
beautiful.
the painting. Yeah, so this is like, you can see it's like me, right?
Absolutely. It's
And
like half of a
yes,
face,
yep.
and we've got this beautiful scenery off to the side, a little gnome, some toadstool.
Yeah, and then there's a little city floating in the sky, and that little city is my city in Poland. So my family immigrated from Poland, Wrocław, which is 3 hours southeast of Warsaw. And in that city, there are little gnome statues all over the city, and it's known for these little statues. You go on like a gnome hunt. There's like 400 of these statues. They're about yay big, and they're all over the city, and people come and you take pictures and you go on this big hunt. And when I was growing up, because we came as immigrants from Poland in through Latina. So I was born in a refugee camp in Latina. So when we were growing up, our grandparents were coming back and forth and they would tell us stories about witches and gnomes and all these magical things. And we would walk through the forest and there would be owls and those owls would be magical. All these things were like just magic. So when I look back at it, I think it was partly a way to keep us really creative and kind of never realizing that we were kind of struggling. Like, so our
Mm.
grandparents really worked really hard to like make everything amazing and magical. And it was the simplest things, right? It could be like that key over there, and that key over there opens this magical world. And if you have that key around your neck, you know, you may be able to get into the magical world one day. And a key is like, you know, it could be like some lost or found key or whatever, right? But it was just this bright childhood experience. So from that, after that first, and I'm so grateful that I had grandparents that were like that, because it made our childhood super colorful. My grandma on
Absolutely.
my mom's side used to say before sleeping, not good night, she would say colorful dreams. And
I
that
love
was,
that.
I know. And it was just like, that's what they made it for us, right? But that was like their storytelling and their way of like, you know, going through the war and having, you know, all of that stuff. They really just tried to look at everything through this colorful lens after all these like negative experiences that they had. And while our parents were trying to create this better life for us, right? So after I finished that first book, the second one, this one, I was like, I want to do something for myself, but also to like incorporate and weave in that story and that feeling that I had when I was growing up through the storytelling that my grandparents gave us, and through
Mm.
that whole experience of all those gnomes and this magical, like, I really do feel like Wrocław is one of the most magical places in the world. So I wanted to put that in the storybook. So when I started doing when I did this first painting, it wasn't with the idea. I did this even before that first book, but I didn't have the idea at all to create it. And then my dad was here, and just out of the blue, like the entire concept of the book, the toy, everything that I want to do with it just came. And I sat down and I just wrote it all down. And then I was so excited, and I came home and I was like, oh my God, blah, 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 right? And then my dad's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, I'm going to do a book, I'm going to do this, we're going to film, and we're going to do that, half in Poland and half Canada, da, 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 da. And then I just started working on it. I first did all of I wrote out the chapters, wrote out the story, and then I started working on breaking down the chapters and drawing the images, some of which I used actually from pandemic time because I was teaching online every single day. So I had about 360, 370 images that I had created on online tutorials. So some of them were from that period as well.
Mm.
And then I contacted a toy manufacturer, and I was like, I need the toy at the same time as I get the book. So I wanted them both together. So from 2016 was the very first bit of it. And then up to, I guess, 2023, I guess I published it and put it out there. I don't even remember what year it was. The last like few years have been a blur, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I
Yeah.
really
So
want to
like,
chat about the plushie, the toy
yes.
that accompanies the book. So, walk us through the process. So, you connected with a toy manufacturer.
Mhm.
Where did you find them? What was the process of going through prototyping? How did you
It was
decide all of this?
so fun. I knew I had to have a toy because I have been teaching kids since 2006. I've been in education, and I know how much they love toys, right? So I wanted to make it something that would like be meaningful. So the concept of the toy really is that it gains heart power when you do good deeds. And when you do good deeds, that's when the magic comes to your family, right? So there's lots of little things that the kids can do. We have DIY kits that go with it too, and different like stories. We read this a lot we run summer camps and winter camps and all that. We have about 1,000 students a year. So this story goes into our curriculum as well. But when I first did the drawing of it, I ended up just looking at a bunch of toy manufacturers, and I found one out of Toronto called Happy Worker, and I sent them the concept, and they did everything for me. So basically they took my drawing and then they gave me the prototypes. They sent me the prototype after, and you know, do I like it? Is there anything we want to change? And they like literally hit it out of the ballpark like right away. I didn't have like many edits at all. And then about a year later, 3,000 toys arrived.
That is just crazy. So the toy, can it be purchased separately? And you
Yeah.
do have a package where you can get the book and the
Yeah.
toy together as well. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And then we're developing, like, so there's rewards and incentives for people to take the toy, adults included. So people have bought these as adults and they take them traveling with them. And then they send me pictures. So he's gone to like Guatemala, Egypt, Bahamas, Jamaica, Mexico, all over Europe. He was just in Paris. So our students and like my followers will take him. And it's such a great little companion, not just for kids, but if you're single too. It makes it fun for you to travel and like take the gnomes. Did you ever see the movie Amelie?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so you know how like little gnome and he travels around the garden and it's hers and he she takes pictures
Yeah.
for her dad. So I was like, we have to do that with the gnome, and now people do that, and it's adorable too. So there's this whole other element of like learning about geography and learning about places, but also like giving people something like creative to do too. They're taking photography by interacting with the toy and doing
Mm,
creative things themselves on their trip, even though that most people think they're not creative at all, right? So
right.
the toy does these amazing things without me too, and he's out there working, doing his thing, and then we get these like amazing photos too. So that has been like such a fun thing to do, and he's so cute, you know? I take him everywhere. I have him in my backpack all the time.
That's amazing. I'm sure he's also a really great conversation starter for people. And like you said, for those who are out doing solo travel, I'm sure he's great for kind of an icebreaker too.
Totally. And like he's like a little buddy, right? You know, when we're kids, we have these like stuffed animals and we have these like little mascots that are with us all the time that make us feel like special and that we always have somebody. And I feel like the last 5 years too, with all the stuff that went on too, people felt very isolated. So for them, this was like an extra little thing too to have and to like feel comforted by, right? This magic, right? So
Mm,
that's kind of, yeah, that the having the toy has been really like an interesting way to put my art out there, but also like help people through different things, you know,
absolutely.
including like keeping them creative, right?
Definitely. Well, I think that that's something that is easily lost in adulthood, right? Like as children, I think that our imagination and creativity is often fostered by school, our family, the storybooks that we read, and
Saturday morning
then
cartoons.
exactly. And then we get into the responsibility of adulthood. And I think it's really easy for some of that magic, as you say, to fall to the wayside. So that's a really nice, I think, reminder and a
Yeah.
little kind of connection back to that inner child.
In the book too, I talk about the forgotten fog and how people, when they get older, they forget the magic. So you have to stay a
Mm,
golden believer. And that's kind of, it's all related to the toy and staying in that mindset of like anything is possible. The world is magical, guys. We just forget. And I think as adults, you're right. We get into this like mode of like, I'm going to work, I have to pay my bills, da, 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 da. And we often, I was just talking about this morning, we often get like almost duped into trading like some of the best years of our life for money and for paying our bills and just this like cycle, and we forget about all this magic and we forget about our dreams and our goals, and it's just so important to like stay connected to that piece of yourself because time is going to pass and life is short, right? Never guaranteed to anybody, right? So I think like a
definitely.
big piece of like why I love doing stuff that relates to magic and kids and also like incorporating all the adults is that to kind of remind them like don't go in the forgotten fog, guys, it's all magic still, like no, come on, we can do it, right? So
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things that I've noticed is having kids has really kind of reignited some of that magic in my everyday life. I have a 3.5-year-old and a 19-month-old, and it's just so sweet to see them learning about the world and interpreting things in the world and the little
Mhm.
things that they pick up on that are just taken for granted by us in everyday life. And so I really appreciate the sentiment behind trying to keep that magic alive for
Mhm. Mhm.
everybody, no matter what their age is. Can we chat a bit about how you took a plushie, which maybe is traditionally more associated as something for children and this children's storybook, and pivoted the marketing around it to then encourage adults to pick up this plushie and take it with them on their travels.
Yeah.
What did that whole experience look like, and how did that begin?
Well, I have a pretty active social media
Mm-hmm.
presence. I've always used social media to promote what I'm doing, to highlight like my artwork and like my events and different things. So when I released the book and the toy, I already had quite a large following of people, including adult students who would come for painting parties or adult classes, or had come to events and things. And so when I launched it, I did do an Indiegogo campaign. So I did that first. So a lot of the people that bought were adults. And then because I had a lot of the following already, the first like 100 people were all adults who bought them and bought the book and the toy to support me because they know what I'm doing in the community, or they like our events or that kind of thing. So they wanted to support the project. So it was just kind of like a natural thing that just happened. And then when people would travel, I would also say at the very beginning, I was like, hey, where are you going? And I would give them a toy to take with them. So it just became this like thing that now people are like, oh, I'm going on a trip, I need a toy. And, it just kind of morphed into that. So I wasn't really like forcing it, rather than it just kind of came about that way because of, just
Very
natural.
organic.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. You mentioned Indiegogo. If you are using an assisted self-publishing company, there is, of course, services that are paid for and provided on the end of the assisted self-publishing company. And it is very much an investment for the author who is getting involved. Can you talk a little bit about what that crowdfunding process was like?
Yeah, well, my whole family's in sales, and when we were growing up, my dad was in sales. He had his own business, and then my mom became a real estate agent, so she was in sales. My sister owns a daycare. I have my art school and all my projects, and my cousins, like everyone has something. And I think that's partly because we immigrated, and so we were always like, trying to make more, and like, when immigrants come here to Canada, I don't, even with their accreditations and their expertise in different areas or university degrees or whatever, they're always like getting like Uber jobs to start off with, right? Until they can like transfer their accreditation or whatever, right? So when we were growing up, we were always doing sales. And so when I started the projects, like I was already very aware of, this is going to cost me some money, right? 3,000 toys is the minimum order. That's not going to be very inexpensive at all, right? So like, how am I going to, how am I going to get that cash? So I have always made it a practice that I pre-sell everything. So for example, our summer camps are pre-sold through the year. We do different tiers of rates. So people who come in early get an early bird rate, and then there's a middle one, and then there's the regular price for people who don't want to sign up early or whatever, right? So I did the same thing with the toy in the book. I put out different tiers, I put out different special offers, and then that enabled me to put that money in before I even had the book done and before I even had the toy done. I had that funding. Of course, I pulled some funding from elsewhere as well because the toys were quite a large investment.
Mm-hmm.
But definitely the books for sure. And I mean, all the other supplies I had with me, but that's always something that I've done because I don't like debt. So I don't like credit cards. I don't like loans. I like pre-selling things. So when the Indiegogo and the Kickstarter, when all those,
Kickstarter, yeah.
when all those started coming out, I thought, oh my gosh, these are genius for people because you can pre-sell it and now it's normalized. Whereas like kind of before, people were a little bit leery about, oh, you want me to buy your book and it's not even here yet, like, or you want me to pre-buy whatever and it's not here yet. But now it's very normalized, and it's really to the benefit of the artists to use those platforms, especially if they are active on social media, because you can reach a lot of people in a short amount of time. And we did the same thing with Indiegogo on our first book too, with the Murray the Dragon, with my partner Christina, and we raised all the money to make that and had enough even for our lunch party afterwards, right? So it was like perfect.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was really great. But that really requires, like, you have to really understand that yes, all of this is going to cost money and no one's just going to pay you to like make a book, right? And and all of that, going to markets, there's table fees, going to events, there's, whatever ticket fees, whatever you're paying, you got to get your marketing, you got your printing, you got all the stuff that you have to like put together before you can even sell the product, right? So, and that a lot of it you can do on sweat equity, but there's definitely going to be, depending how big you want your orders, or how, like if your toys, if you have minimum orders, then definitely, you got to look at that, the cost, and how you're going to come up with that.
I think that is incredible advice. It's something that we haven't really covered yet in our podcast. And there is often that curiosity around, how will I get money to invest in this project? And crowdfunding, I think, is amazing. Something else that I did for my own book was a sponsorship. My book is about my daughter who went through the cranial helmeting process as an infant. And so we connected directly with the helmet provider that we worked with and said, hey, can we partner on this project? You sponsor the project, I'll write the project and manage the production process of it. And then they took so many copies that are now in their clinics across Canada to provide to families going through the process. Like, there are so many creative ways to make this vision come to reality. Well, it's just about kind of exploring
you brought up this like really great point there with your book, because when you involve other people and they're benefiting from the project as well, then it's a win-win for everybody, right? So whether you're taking sponsorships or grants, or you're putting somebody's logo on the back of your book, or you're putting somebody's logo at your event, or you're letting them come with a booth to your launch event, or whatever creative ways that you can make that happen, and someone else is winning or someone else's business is winning as well, it makes it so much easier too, right? And there are so many ways to do that, and people, there's just like a million solutions all the time, right? Like, we got to focus on the solutions, not the problems, right?
Definitely. And it also just adds to the number of people who are invested in the project, like from the perspective of wanting to see it succeed. And so now you have multiple people who are sending, again, going back to that good energy, the good vibrations, all towards your project and the thing that you're working on. And even so like, it just makes it more powerful.
Same thing with like later, even if you didn't do it while you're building it, like you can always say, okay, this month proceeds from all book sales are going, $2 is going to this charity or that charity or this project or whatever, and you partner up with that organization, and then they help you promote it to their network, because they're going to get a percentage of the sales too, and they're going to be able to do good things in the community with that. I always think that the more people that you help and the wealthier that you become when you're a good person, the more you're able to amplify your goodness too, right? So I think not being shy about generating revenue is super important too, right? Because you can say to some big organization maybe that helps children, you could say, if they could sell 1 million copies of your book, there's $1 million, like that they could have 10% of right there. And that's nothing to sneeze at with all just a clicks. That the internet is so amazing now that you can just put this stuff out, and with a couple clicks, people can pre-order it and ship it and drop ship it, and all this amazing stuff is going on now too, right? So it's not hard. You just have to find the right partnerships too, right?
Absolutely. I think that goes back to this idea of being very business oriented and having that entrepreneurial mindset, which you clearly have a lot of experience with. And so I think that this is all going to be just very insightful for our audience. I know that it's something that doesn't come naturally to many people, and it's something that a lot of people do wonder about. And so I think that this conversation is going to be really helpful for so many. If you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice before publishing your first book, what would that advice look like?
I think my only advice to myself would be to like not put so much pressure on myself, and not like have these expectations of like, okay, well, I gotta like have 10 different things. I gotta go on tour. I gotta get into like 100 different stores and just like pace myself, right? Because I find that like okay, for example, like, yeah, sure, we'll have it into like a bunch of different stores. And then, because I was just rushing, I was looking at the number of like places we're in instead of looking at like really like the people and is this the right fit for me? And as are
Mm,
these people aligned? Are they training their staff? Are they gonna have events, or are they just like not the right fit for me as like energetically either as a business owner either, right? Like, are they going to put in the
right.
same amount of effort, right? So sometimes it's not about like the quantity, but really of the quality of the people that you're working with and that you're trying to get into, especially for retail. Like, if you're trying to get into retail as an author, you want to work with people who are like going to be as invested in your book or your project or your toy as they are in their business, and not just like let it sit in the side and collect dust and never talk about it, never promote it, never have an opportunity to like do an event or whatever, right? So I think that's my biggest learning, because I have so many of these toys and books that I'm always like looking, where do I go? What do I do? And how do I get it out there more, right? But like I've learned that like you really have to find the right people to work with.
Definitely. I think that that's great advice. And what is next for you in your journey as an author and a creative entrepreneur?
Well, as an author, definitely I want to turn this into a movie. So, one of the things that I
Amazing.
have been working on for the last 5 years is getting my Polish citizenship, because my parents immigrated, they never filed, and my mom died when I was just turned 25. She'd been sick for about 5 years, so like they just didn't file my paperwork. So, one of the things when I was going back and forth taking care of her mom, who recently just passed away last year too, was I was working on all my citizenship. So I want to film this in partly in Poland and also in Canada and turn it into like a short film. So that's definitely what I would love to do in the next like 5 years for sure. And maybe make like an activity book with it and develop like the educational tools, get it into some schools, that kind of thing. And then on my entrepreneur side, we just expanded. So we have two art studios. We have 12 art teachers. So they're teaching programs and camps and kids classes and all that. So we're just expanding really the services that we offer in our community, vamping up the virtual classes. And then I just got a restaurant. I just bought a restaurant. So
My
I'm working on that.
gosh.
Yeah.
You're not busy at all.
No, but it's all just like the team and the people, like you said earlier, it's like the people, when you have the community around you and you can offer the goodness back to the community, people
Hmm.
want to be a part of it. So sure, I'm spearheading it and I'm working at it, but I'm still enjoying my life because all these people are around and they're contributing and they want to see the success of it, right? So I'm not doing it by
Right.
myself. I have my team, I have a wonderful team. I have my wonderful family and friends, and then I have like thousands of clients that are like, yeah, we're in, let's go. And now we're just bringing in investors as well. So it's just been like a great um, full circle kind of thing. I started as a waitress in university, so now I'm going back to that world, which I love, also with like the organic food and all that kind of thing too. So
Mm,
yeah, and then we'll have art on the walls and things for sale from local artists as well. And it's just, yeah, it's just
incredible.
a cool thing to build things. I just like building things that help people. So that's kind of what I'm gonna do for the next little while.
I love that.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much for joining me for today's
my
conversation. I just have one
pleasure.
more question. It's from our user submitted question segment, The Plot Thickens.
Ooh.
So, for those listening, please be sure to follow us on Instagram at Tellwell Publishing. I go on and I post the question box to our story so that people can comment their questions for the guests that we have on the podcast that week. So, the question that came in here is, how do you juggle marketing several individual products and services?
How do I juggle it? Well, I've always thought that you need to have your own website with your own online store so that you have control. It goes back to the whole control thing. So
Yeah.
while I was building every year, I started my own online store with my own website, which I control from top to bottom. And I never put anything really on these third-party platforms like Etsy or eBay, even. Like I just kind of stayed away from those because I was like, I gotta just build myself. And we saw just a little while ago how eBay just like withheld payments from artists for
Mm.
like a couple months, right? So people were like relying on this income and they couldn't get access to their own money. And I was like, guys, you always have to build your own website. So that was really like how I always ensure that I have my own thing going on. I use lots of scheduling. Instagram and Facebook have always been great. You can get different like third-party apps where you just schedule your whole week. I'm a teacher, so I'm used to compartmentalizing the year of like into chunks. So I often plan in advance and then I just really try to stay organized, right? But if I'm not feeling it, I don't force myself to post either, because the other thing with social media that's so cool is that you can repurpose content, you can sponsor posts, you can boost posts, you can direct people into funnels. So building websites of your own that you own and funnels that you own really help you juggle it, because the technology is there now that you don't have to do everything yourself anymore, right?
Mm.
So if you learn about these things, especially funnels and lead magnets and things that will generate emails or even just opt-ins so that you can start writing newsletters. I've been writing newsletters for 20 years, so I'm very dedicated to that. I've always been dedicated to that, and that has served me well financially, definitely, because people follow, right? And when I release something in my newsletter, they're there, right? So it's not really about juggling. It's really about like learning marketing and then implementing
Mhm.
it and sticking to it. It took me a good 10 years to figure it out, because I didn't go to business school and I didn't go, to all these fancy, you know, schools. I went to teacher school. I
Yeah.
had to learn it myself, but it wasn't hard. It just took me a lot longer, I think, than if I had gone into like business school, right?
For sure. I
Yeah.
think taking the time to decipher what information is going to serve you, what things are going to work for you. Like you mentioned, it's a lot of trial and error, figuring out for your specific audience, your specific products and services, which marketing tools are going to be most beneficial. And it sounds like you found out that the
Newsletter.
newsletter route is really beneficial for you.
Yeah.
And one of the things I think is great about newsletters is that that is a very engaged audience. It's a very intentional audience. They have opted in to receive a newsletter directly to their inbox. They're not someone who is maybe passively following along on social media. And if they
Yeah.
see your content, great, but they're not actively seeking it out.
Yeah.
So I think that the newsletter is a really great kind of direct route
Yeah.
to your ideal audience.
Well, I
So
think
that's awesome that
I
you found
think that
that
that's the
success.
thing too, right? Like you just gotta like start and then just like maintain. And I think that's really one of the things I learned with teaching is that like you have the curriculum and then the next year you can teach it again, but you just add to it. You just spice it up a little bit. And it's the same thing with like your business. Like there's obviously all the holidays, all the different, especially Christmas, my favorite because people shop the most. And, it's like you just keep doing it every year. You have like, right now we have our Christmas and July sale. So, like, that's something I do every single year. And it's so popular. And it's just this huge influx of boosted revenue. And if you just do those same things over and over again, but just tweak them every year, it becomes really easy. So it doesn't feel like juggling.
Mm.
It really feels more like you're tossing a ball to yourself all the time, right? And you're just kind of playing ball,
Right.
right?
So, with all of these products and service offerings that you offer, they're all within your own umbrella of your brand. They're all housed on the same website. They're all promoted on the same social media. Is that kind of the strategy that you've taken?
In terms of like the art education, yes, everything's on the same website. The books all have their own websites and their own social medias too. So I do manage like several different accounts, but the newsletter is all encompassing in one thing, definitely, yeah. And one main website with
Amazing.
all the different, kind of like my own Etsy, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where it links out to the individual, but people can find everything that they need
exactly.
under the one
And
website.
then I think that's so
Awesome.
cool because you've got all these different products all in one place, and you've got art. We have artists that we represent as well. So they're promoting that, and then it all leads back to one main site, right? But I'm in control of instead of some corporate board of
Third
directors
party.
in Texas or something.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much again. Thank you for providing all of this insight and knowledge. I can't wait to see what our listeners think and how they
Yeah.
take these tidbits of information and implement it themselves. I think that it's going to
Absolutely. And if
be
anybody ever wants to
great.
reach out to me, I'm very active on social media. I love talking to people. I love like helping other artists. And if there's anything that I can do to like help other people, I'm always, yeah, very reachable. People can find me.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much again for being here, Monica. And for those
Yeah.
listening, please be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. This will also be available to watch on YouTube, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.